All right, so welcome back in another day here at DCENTRAL in Miami, covering a lot of things around Web3, obviously the metaverse, but today I want to dive in a little deeper into the intricacies of crypto in general, and probably the one guy that everybody wants to listen to today about what's happening with that is, of course, Ben Armstrong over from Bitboy Crypto. So great having you on the show today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here in Miami, and weather's nice. I was just in the Bahamas. The weather's nice there too, but the heat is on.
Yeah, it's a good one. All right, you guys, make sure and hit the like button. If you're catching this after the event, make sure and drop some comments down below. We're going to get into it today with Ben. Ben, obviously you've been, everybody knows where you've been. You've been down in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So trying to really kind of track down a little bit more about the FTX scenario. A lot has been surfaced.
Right.
You know, I think pretty much everybody that's been in crypto for any time kind of understands what's happening. The real question I have is the catalyst that kind of caused this house of cards to fall. If you look back, based on the things that you guys have found, a lot of the research, a lot of things that you were pointing to early on, where do you think it went wrong?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly this was never supposed to happen overnight, where we were going to get this collapse. I think basically they were trying to figure out what this insolvency hole, how they were going to plug it, and then they started making big moves. You look at Voyager, you look at Celsius, you look at Terra Luna, you look at Three Arrows Capital, is basically they were kind of liquidation hunting, and they were stop loss hunting. FTX was gigantic nine-figure deals, nine-figure profit-making opportunities because they had a 10-figure insolvency hole, and they weren't really able to make progress against it. Here's what people have to understand: when we first started investigating this, the last week of October, we realized 95% of the market on FTX was fake.
Yeah.
And we learned that from the project side, and we started, learning more and more about it. But the issue is that when we were looking at this and examining it, we thought we had some time to be able to figure stuff out. And that was the last week of October. Well, November 2nd, CoinDesk releases the report, which I believe 100% the whistleblower to CZ and to CoinDesk was Brett Harrison from FTX US.
Former CEO.
Yeah,
okay.
He was of FTX US. And so this kind of happened overnight. It blew up, but there was a shot clock. If FTX was able to do they were able to acquire Voyager, that bought them more time, because they were going to bring in more liquid assets. If they were able to buy Celsius, more liquid assets.
Well, much like the framework they started with BlockFi.
Exactly.
Many people look at that acquisition as being one of the fuels in that furnace that essentially blew up. All right, so with all of that, and you think about Brett Harrison,
Call me, Brett. Call me. I haven't talked to you yet.
If that is the case, I mean, he knows where the bodies are buried. Yeah,
so here's what's really fascinating. Like, just so people kind of understand how we got involved in this, if they haven't been following the whole saga, we have a bill in Congress. Well, we're trying to get it in Congress. I will tell Paul what it is off air. But we can't publicly talk about it until we're registered. Well, we have main political backers. We have a main Democratic and a main Republican political backer. Sam, FTX, they tried to steal one of our political backers when we went to them for funding. That's how we figured out they were doing this federal bit license, and kind of how this whole thing, kind of started to unravel for us. And something happened as we were going through this path. Like, all of a sudden, everybody started sending me like all kinds of crazy information on the insolvency. But the way we discovered all this was through Brett Harrison. He was our contact that connected us to former CFTC Commissioner Mark Wetjen, who scrubbed himself of the entire internet over this. He was the policy head. And so we had talked to him about all this stuff, and things started unraveling. Well, the day after we came out with a video and explained the federal bit license, the next day Brett Harrison stepped down from FTX US. The next day after that, he followed me on Twitter.
Interesting.
He was trying to he wanted to give me information.
It was a smoke signal.
It was a smoke signal, but now looking, I didn't respond to him right away because I was still mad that they tried to steal my person from me. Like, I don't know if I can tell, I'm vengeful, I get kind of spiteful, you try to steal something from me. And so when you look at the way that all happened, like, to me, within 2 weeks from that point, all of the stuff started leaking. Brett Harrison knows where all the bodies are, and he's telling people. I believe he's talking. I believe he is the whistleblower here.
Why do you think we have not seen action on SBF yet, in terms of real legal action? Where we see either somebody's walking out with handcuffs, or, I mean, this is literally a Madoff level event.
Bigger.
So
bigger because,
why wouldn't you see this?
Most of the Madoff people got paid back.
So I know his mom and dad.
Yep.
Obviously tied to a lot of interesting people in DC.
Uh-huh.
Then you look at the layer of support that he had underneath him, including Kevin O'Leary and many others.
Oh, now let me tell you, the Kevin O'Leary stuff, we got, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to bring out way more on that. Y'all are going to figure out Kevin O'Leary is actually a gigantic player.
The question is why has the authorities not gone in?
Okay, so I spoke with the people in the Bahamas. We actually went and did a live stream with Lincoln Bain, who is kind of the leader of one of their political parties there.
Right.
He ran for prime minister. He wants to change the government and be a president instead of prime minister, all this stuff. So we got a lot of information on that end from the Bahamas side. On the Bahamas side, the thing is, they hate corruption in the Bahamas. There's a ton of corruption in the Bahamas.
Did you see their AG go on yesterday?
Ryan Pender. Ryan Pender, who people don't know, may not, he left the government and went and worked for Deltec Bank, that was the partner of FTX, Alameda, and also Tether, and then came back to the government.
Interesting points he was making too.
Yeah.
So he literally threw CZ under the bus.
Well, yeah, because they don't want people to. You have to understand how much of the Bahamian government and the Bahamian people are about image.
Yeah.
They are much more concerned, and we love the people in the Bahamas. They were great to us.
It's going to look bad, definitely.
It makes the country look bad, and they're actually more concerned about the image than the actual wrongdoing. And so that's why a couple weeks before SBF, before all this stuff started coming out, FTX had just given new tablets to the whole police force. So now you've got a lot of overlap where they're not wanting to move. But even if in the Bahamas they act, we've been told he'll probably get a $100,000 to $300,000 fine.
It'd be over.
The United States, the FBI has to go extradite him. And I'm telling you.
Well, it's only one entity in the Bahamas right now from under the FTX umbrella. They have one entity inside the Bahamas that actually registered in the Bahamas. More. So how far,
they have a lot more.
far into the rabbit hole does it go?
Oh, it goes so deep.
In terms of the number of companies, did you see the layout of how they've connected all of this?
But that's not even all of it.
So do you think
so much? Listen to this.
Is this Bankman that's doing this? His dad?
Yeah. This is what we believe is now happening, and this may sound counter to some things that I've said in the past. And just like anything, the more you investigate, the more you discover what's going on, your opinion can change. Guys, I think I know more about what was happening at FTX and Alameda than Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
Mom, Dad, Alan Joseph Bankman, Barbara Fried.
Yeah.
We call them the puppet masters. They were pulling the strings behind the scenes. When you see all this news coverage about these puff pieces, New York Times, this is coming from them. If you saw one of the statements that Sam put out, it used double spaces between the periods. Sam doesn't talk like that. He's never written that way. The architect is Dan Friedberg, the former general counsel for FTX, who also ran the Ultimate Bet poker scandal, the greatest poker scandal in history. And I was speaking with some people last night. There's very interesting conversations about where all this is going. And when you compare the Ultimate Bet scandal to what's going on here, the big difference is what really happened with Ultimate Bet didn't come out until like 7 years later when these audio got released.
All of this is wide open.
Have it all in I have it all in real time. I have all the all the audio tapes, all the videos, emails, text messages. This is all coming out in real time. I think within 1 year from now, the Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried, along with Dan Friedberg, they're going to be totally exposed as the architects of this entire thing.
This will be interesting. All right, so Ben, let's jump over to another section of maybe heavy corruption in the industry, and that is coming from the VCs. If you look at where the VCs have been, you kind of follow the footprints. You start to see some interesting similarities, but also the whole issue of kind of making their own weather, so to speak. Especially when you look at the decks of all of that. I kind of grew up in Silicon Valley, so I know a lot of these guys. And at the same time, I look at kind of the framework in which they've kind of constructed these deals. And even knowing how the magic is made, I kind of look back and go, why would these guys go into this level of really kind of manipulation, especially around tokens and ICOs, early movement, and then dumping on projects. So you look at Solana being one of the big ones.
Where's those all-in podcast guys bragging about dumping on all the retail?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about where you think VCs are going to hold up, and if they're going to hold up in this next cycle to the next bull run.
Yeah, people gotta understand these VCs and these hedge funds. Like, I don't care about them at all in terms of like when we're looking at Celsius and Voyager, there's users that got hurt there. When we're looking at FTX, there's users that got hurt. I have no sympathy for Three Arrows Capital. Sorry, I don't care. You look at these VC companies, lose all your money. I don't care. That's the way they treat us. That's the way they treat retail. They always try to win. They squeeze every single dollar out of us they can. Let's look at Solana. Solana is a really great example because there's a lot of problems with Solana, right? We talk about why their blockchain paused. That stuff's going to be coming out in the next few weeks.
Yep.
But when you look at the way they did their token lockups for their VCs, here is the scam, okay? Yep. The scam is, hey, check this out. We've got this really great project. We got all these investors. They're big names. They can't sell their tokens. Cool. They created synthetic versions of Solana to go in and buy these flywheel tokens of FTT, Serum, and also STEPN. A lot of people don't know how involved STEPN was in this. STEPN itself as a project, if everybody remembers, this was, what was it, walk to earn, workout to earn, whatever it was.
Move to earn.
Move to earn. There. Paul, he knows. I don't know. It's move to earn. But the fact is that STEPN, we do not believe, was complicit in the way that Solana and the VCs used them to pump the price. The people that founded STEPN and were behind it, now we don't know for sure, but we don't think they were involved in it or complicit in this.
Okay.
The VCs are the ones that are using these projects.
This has been the argument around the VC community, and right now I think a lot of people who have kind of challenged this, even if you look at what Clipstein's talking about, he's after A16Z, thinking that maybe there's some issues over there. With that being the framework, Ben, you and I both know that a lot of what we saw in the altcoin community was pretty much propped up by the VCs. Grew those markets, those tokens. A lot of that ecosystem was really built around VC capital moving in. You move into this next cycle of a halving and another potential bull run, which could be maybe the biggest ever.
Hopefully.
These guys could be completely sidelined. How would that affect the flow of capital into the space?
Yeah, it is a great question. And it's so funny, like we look at all these different things that occur in these cycles and they're like, it's different this time, or well, this isn't gonna work. Look at the macro. The macro's so bad, like, Bitcoin can't get off the mat. And it's like, well, no, it dropped 75% this time. It didn't even drop 85%. So when you look at all these factors, like this is just one more of those things where one of these big arguments is, where does the money come from? Well, it comes in every cycle from a different source. In my opinion, what we're seeing right now is we are finally, after years and years of talking about this, we're now seeing geopolitical warfare within crypto. Nation states are now going to be starting to move money and capital in. You look at the positioning that Russia is doing, what China is doing with Bitcoin mining, which is, that whole thing was a scam. Like, China still has the majority of the hash rate. They just spread it out to Kazakhstan and different countries, but all the money's still flowing back to China. Obviously, Bitmain, all of the mining equipment is in China. So you're starting to see positioning the United States. Guess what, guys? We just got over $3 billion worth of crypto from a guy from Silk Road. So you're starting to see the positioning of these countries, and people have just such a wrong narrative about what happens in crypto. It makes me laugh sometimes. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, listen, these countries are going to get crypto right now, and then they're going to dump it, and then we're going to go to zero. No, they're buying crypto because they're buying Bitcoin, or they're acquiring Bitcoin through, criminal investigations, because they understand how valuable it's going to be worth. You look back at Silk Road at the price points that our government auctioned off Bitcoin at, and what that money is worth today. They're not stupid. They see their mistake in the past. So in my opinion, that's where the next round of the gigantic money is going to be coming is from actual governments and countries.
Well, I think, in the essence of where, because this last time it really was the VCs that was propping this up. If you look at the altcoin list and the top 100 tokens, many of those were driven by, you named the, Sand Hill Road Company, and they were there in terms of where that's going. All right, so let's take a look at what has to change, especially from a regulation standpoint. All right, regulations, we're going to see a lot of this now being pointed at because of the crypto space and all of our deficiencies.
Our sins. Let's just call them our sins.
Our sins. We get to go to the pulpit and pay a little bit of a price now. So what do you think is going to be the worst case coming out of this? Let's look worst case, best case.
Okay. Worst case is that the tentacles of the FTX debacle go so deep and so far that somehow the idea of what Sam wanted to do with regulation still comes to pass. Which is centralization, getting rid of decentralization, getting rid of DeFi, federal bit license, getting rid of peer-to-peer transactions, and things like that. Like, that's the worst case. That's not gonna happen, and here's why. Sam and FTX are so toxic to politicians right now. I know
they're at a distance.
They're pushing further and further.
Yeah.
For them to be able to actually use language, regarding Sam, what he wanted for, which, by the way, when me and Sam were texting back and forth this week, one of the things he literally told me, I'm not going to expose the screenshots and all the stuff he said, but he told me, he said, I really respect that you care about things. I really, really, really disagree with you on regulation. And I was like,
yeah, of course you do.
Perfect. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, So his idea of regulation is centralization. And everybody has this idea.
Yeah.
A lot of people have this idea that, number one, thinking that this is a false flag event and this was all set up to get crypto regulation across the finish line, that's low IQ. That doesn't make sense. This thing blew up overnight. It was not meant to come out like this.
Yeah, it was mismanaged.
This actually looks worse for the people that want to do that type of regulation. We've never had a bigger commercial for decentralization than what we just went through. So you have that going on, right? So on the other side of it, you also have people that say, oh my gosh, you're going to come down so hard on us now because of all this. And it's like, well, number one, we already had bills in place that are still being worked on. And number two, you basically have people that are looking at this situation and wanting to capitalize on it to help things. Some are going to want to do things in a bad light, but it's not going to be quick. We just had a turnaround in Congress. So the worst case scenario is we move more to centralization. It happens quickly and people are scared. I don't believe that's going to happen. Our bill that is, we're in the process of getting it registered. I can't exactly detail it, but what it is, it creates a mechanism for smart crypto regulation to where we at Crypto have a seat at the table, and we're able to have a body that helps push back against some of these ideas, right? I believe we win. I think we're going to win. I think actually people are looking back on this in a year from now, and they're going to say, oh, all the stuff that happened with Sam
actually might have been a good thing.
100%. That's I believe not only the best case. I believe that it's going to happen. And when you look at our bill, we have bipartisan support from some of the biggest people on both sides of the aisle. And I would say I had another major senator reach out wanting to see more information about what we're doing. They're very interested in this. They want it to be fair. They're not ready to do regulation. The Senate, Congress, any committee, they don't have it together. We've got to have another body that's able to help make decisions.
They got to get themselves aligned, not only on the mission of what crypto's trying to do, but also who are the players going to be? Because there's going to be a ton of those that they have to start really looking at, either whether it's banks, obviously the VCs, the big decentralized exchanges. Obviously, they're going to come in on that. Stablecoins, the whole layer is going to get, I think, a certain framework that eventually kind of plays back to what you're talking about.
And I think that's big. I met with the FBI last week, which is pretty crazy. Like, I actually reached out to them. People are going to find some stuff that happened to me personally that people don't know about yet. And I reached out to the FBI on behalf of some of those things. And they came and talked to me, and they're like, hey, also, we want to know about some different stuff about crypto, like not specifics, like crime stuff, but like, hey, how can we help clean up crime in general in the space? And when we were talking to the FBI about this, like, it just became so apparent that nobody is ready yet for regulation. The FBI itself, they're still trying to get their hands around what is happening in crypto when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And I think that ultimately, people want to see things that are going to be smart from a regulation, from a legislation, from a investigative side, Department of Justice side. There's a lot of moving parts going on right now, with every department that exists. And everybody wants to work together to create something that makes sense. One of the things that they specifically told me, right? We like decentralization, right? You're a decentralization guy. I'm a decentralization guy. The audience, y'all are decentralized people. We love Web3. We love all this stuff. However, the FBI doesn't. Why?
It's very difficult for it to track. I mean, obviously for the money laundering problem, sure.
Well, we look at it from a money laundering side, but there's a much bigger piece to this. A bigger piece to it is, if there's a $700 million hack on a bridge, and the FBI has no recourse to be able to get people's money back or investigate, that doesn't really make sense. The reason why they're pushing for us to be able to have funds that are tracked is for these gigantic cases where they're paralyzed, they can't do anything. So something exists. What we have to come up with, and I told them, I said, look, I believe in financial sovereignty. I believe in transparency. I believe that people deserve privacy in their transactions. And they generally agree with that too. At least the FBI agents I was talking to.
Yeah.
But they need to have a way to track these gigantic hacks.
Yeah.
And so we've been talking with them about like, hey, there are ways that you can have pixels on sites to where you're not tracking every transaction, but you're like on a decentralized exchange, for instance, but you're able to, if there's a fail-safe, if there's something really bad that happens, there is a cookie trail or a breadcrumb trail that can lead them to be able to help. I mean, what if Binance got hacked and lost $70 billion worth of assets?
Well, I mean, let's take a look at that for a second. You look at really where the money laundering has been happening for the last 50 years. It's
banks.
Really, it's been banks and also traditional fiat.
100%.
Trying to track traditional fiat is even much more difficult.
It is.
So you've got the same problem that they've been fighting. They have their whole division in there, plus cybercrime, all that. So I look at it and I still think DeFi at least has points of some regulation at some sort of level.
Yeah, well, I mean, like a crime is a crime.
Yeah.
You know, like fraud is a crime.
Yep.
So if you do fraud on DeFi, we don't need regulation to say that's a crime.
Exactly. Yeah. The framework's already there.
Right.
Granted, yes, the traceability of it, I get a little bit uncomfortable when it starts to get into the monetary system because that's where you're starting to control people's money.
Yeah.
And if we get into a digital dollar, people all of a sudden
win.
Yeah. You just
When
turn
we
that
did it
off.
wrong.
You just turn that off, or you put an expiration date on it. I mean, all these things are potential out there for sure. We definitely want to dive in a little deeper with you. I know you're on your way to some speaking gigs here. Ben, great having you on the show today. Thanks a lot for stopping in.
Absolutely, and I think thanks for having me. And the future for crypto is bright. And when it comes to regulation, when it comes to tracking transactions, all this stuff, like we just have to remember at all times, there's a middle ground. We can't give up the ideals in crypto that we have.
For sure.
The thing that Sam wanted to do was hand them over the entire platter, and we got to fight against that. But fighting something that's common sense, makes sense, to where we can all kind of get a piece of the pie and all feel like we're covered and safe. That's what we all want to work towards in crypto.
For sure. All right, you guys, make sure and stick around for more content here from DCENTRAL. We'll catch you next time right here on Tech Hive.